Aloha, Flow Riders. Guess what, gang? We back. We are
We're back.
back. You actually, a large portion of you guys are back too. Like everybody's back
We're all
from
back.
their trip to Greater New England. And yes, we are here live to do the flow. It's so exciting. It's a little bit different, Case. We'll be talking to people in the chat that we actually broke bread and lived it up with.
It's very, very true. And if you're like, wait, what? Hang on a second. We just hosted our very first creator camp in real life event here in the Ecamm hometown of Amesbury, Massachusetts. So it was really fun, and hopefully we will get to do it again next year. So if you're feeling FOMO, don't worry, don't panic, hang in there. Next year approaches.
So good, so good. I see people are here. Mommy Lala is here after her long trek from the Philippines Islands all the way to come and kick it with us at CC, which was great. Anyway, so you know what we're going to do, fam? We're going to record an episode of The Flow. And in recording said episode, you guys get to be our live studio audience. And we have a special guest today. And we're doing, what'd you call it, Katie? Crossover episode.
We're doing a crossover episode. So if you're sitting here and you're like Team Flow Riders, you should also be Team Marshall Creates. And today we will show you why. We'll talk through why.
That's so good because, you know, NBC is so good at making crossover episodes. Like, they're the most common crossover episode network available. So when you said that, it just makes me crack up. Anyway, so we're going to do this. If you got questions, make sure you throw them in the chat. We will try to get to them. Other than that, if you haven't done so already, please make sure that you are properly followed. They don't call it subscribing podcast anymore. You follow a podcast. It makes way more sense. And share it with someone who might need to be. I've been listening to and hearing people recommend the flow in the community. So someone says, "I have a question. I want to do this podcasting, blah, blah, blah." They say, "Oh, you should be watching the flow." And they're like, "What?"
Hey.
And I'm like, "Hey, there you go. Okay, cool. All right, cool. All right, so let's do this. Let me do my little drink. Not that kind of drink, people, at 6 a.m. What are you talking about?
I'm really good. I normally never remember my water, but because of camp, I have so much bottled water here. So I'm feeling ready.
Oh my God, you could take a whole bath with all the water we got left. There were some dehydrated folks, or they had Tennessee sipping whiskey in their water bottles. Okay, here we go. Let's count this baby down. In 5, 4. Aloha, Flow Riders, and welcome to another edition of The Flow. I am your Ecamm community manager, Doc Rock, along with my awesome co-host.
Hey, everyone, it's Katie.
Today we got an awesome show. We are doing the crossover episode with Mr. Marshall Fawkes from Marshall Creates. So without further ado, I don't know why we didn't watch Shakespeare this week. We watched Freddy Krueger on your show. It's actually wrong person. Michael Myers. Wait, we did both. We didn't do Freddy. We did Jason and Michael, but not Frederick. Yeah. Oh, he's coming to get you because you skipped him.
Crossover episode, Doc. That's another crossover. Today we're only crossing over with Marshall.
And just as scary. Okay, hey, Marshall. Oh, you wasn't supposed to do that, Louise. Now you get me in trouble.
Welcome to the show, Marshall.
Ecamm fan, what's good, y'all? What's up, Katie? What is up, Doc? Happy to be here.
Man, listen. I'm gonna tell you, for me, definitely one of the highlights of camp was getting to meet you IRL. Just because we kind of came into Ecamm basically at the same time. And so, you know, kind of like the OGs of Ecamm. So it was a trip to finally have the opportunity to meet IRL when you have met the majority of the Jedi Council, right? Is there anybody in the council you didn't meet yet?
No, I haven't met. Well, I've met Alicio and you, but that's it. I haven't, met Marquis,
really?
Bradley, Keith,
Bradley
and
Keith
as well.
There. Yeah.
Yeah, the Keiths are the last on the list. I met everybody else.
Yeah.
Oh no, I didn't meet Alicio yet, but I'll see him in Orlando. All right, so let's dive in.
Yeah.
What are we talking about, Kates?
Today we're talking all about podcast branding. So, branding and design and figuring out how to make your show look good can be a lot for a lot of people. So if you haven't yet checked out Marshall's show, Marshall Creates, he does the show every single Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern on the Ecamm YouTube channel. And he actually does a lot of this live. So if you want to, if you love this episode and follow up with it later, it's definitely worth watching all the way through. But I'm excited to pick your brain today, Marshall, because I think that this is one of those topics where people are like, yes, I want to do a podcast. Yes, I figured out maybe my name. And then it's like, like, what does it look like? Like, what is
Yeah.
the vibe of it, and approaching all of that. So I guess my first question would be, what are the starting points? So if you're brand new and say like you have your name and the concept for what you're going to talk about, or what you're, the kind of the main content for your show, how do you think through the look, and what are the first steps?
Yeah, so a lot of the look of your podcast, it will be based on the logo that you create.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the first steps. But before you even get to the logo design, it's so important to think about who your audience is. Like, who are you speaking to?
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't know that, then you should figure that out first. So you should know who your audience is. Like, don't just make content for everybody. Speak to a specific person. Even if you have a range of, let's say, viewers, who is the type of viewer that's most likely to tune in, or who is the type of viewer that you're best suited to serve with your content? So name them, give them a name. Let's say it's Felicia, age 32. She has 3 kids. She has this type of job. This is the type of music that she listens to. These are the pain points that she's dealing with in her life, and this is how I can help her through my content. So it's important to think about who that person is. Not to say that you won't have viewers that's outside of that, I guess, psychographic or demographic.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're able to kind of speak directly to that person, one, that's how you can grow a lot faster, and two, that's how you can use that information to inform the design, inform the visuals. So when you're creating a logo, you can say, "Oh yeah, Felicia would like this. I think she would get this." Or on the
Yeah.
flip side, I don't think Felicia this would appeal to Felicia, right?
Yeah.
So that's the first thing, is really figuring out who your audience is, and then going into the logo design process and keeping that really simple, y'all. Keeping it simple, whether it's something that you do or something that you get help with, whether it's a designer, maybe someone on Fiverr, but just to give them enough direction to say, hey, this is, I'm working on a podcast. This is the name of the podcast. This is who it's for. And these are the ideas that I have. So you can kind of start that by just writing some ideas down, using Apple Notes, using their app called Freeform, which is like an unlimited canvas
Ooh,
app
cool.
where you can add links and color palettes and really anything you can think of, just to kind of get your ideas out there. But yeah, it's important that you figure out who your audience is before you jump into the logo design process, and then use the logo design to create what we call a design language, which is a look and feel for your podcast. You were saying
Hmm.
something, Doc?
No, I was going to say, here's the best part about Freeform, and it's going to blow everybody's mind because I realize that people do not pay attention. They just buy stuff and don't pay attention. Freeform is extremely expensive, and it's going to cost you an arm and a leg. No, it's actually in your OS. But since people don't use instructions or watch, I don't know, Apple tell you that they're giving you Freeform 3 years ago for free. That most people are like, what's Freeform? How do we get that? It's
That's
on
why
your
it's called
phone.
freeform.
Right? It's on your phone, it's on your iPad, it's on your computer. If you bought a new Mac in the last like 3 years, it's on there. But I know I had to go ahead and pump their brake because I am one of the people that gets irritated that people buy expensive computers and phones and don't bother to read the simplest of the instructions. Okay, I'll breathe. Anyway, you said something that's very important, and I swear, first day of school, man, that was one of the first things they taught us, right? If your audience is everybody, your audience is nobody.
Nobody.
And yet I have been at giant podcast conventions, and there's a session happening and someone goes to teacher and teacher says, hey, so what's your audience look like? And they go, well, anybody can listen to my show. No, they can't. Like, if that's your
Mhm,
answer, you probably have 4 people listening to your show. You legit
mhm,
have to
mhm,
know who your audience is. And really cool, you can go to ChatGPT, you can tell them what your podcast is about, and tell them to
Mhm.
help you generate a listener avatar or a viewer avatar, and it will help you like narrow down by asking questions like who is the person that you're looking for. And I agree, you should have their name and what they do and the whole nine yards, because it's easier to know when you're speaking to a particular person, right? Like I knew when we were doing this show that we were talking to Andy and Lala because we kind of knew them ahead of time,
Mhm.
right? You know what I'm saying? So we kind of knew who our avatar was based off of our avatar is our audience for our software. So we kind of got that nailed, right? We're looking for people who want to be as dope as you, but aren't quite there yet.
That's so true. I'm going to take the note on freeform because I'm one of those people that totally doesn't pay attention to what's existing on my
And
computer. But I was
see, that's not fair because I showed you Freeform before, and I told you, and I also offered to teach you the OS, period, point blank. And I have actually done Mac OS for Creator classes twice, and I'm doing another one coming up soon.
and
So
I need to sign up for that. But I will say so I will get better at freeform, but I do know how to rock a Pinterest board. So if you for whatever reason you're not freeform, into the freeform yet, I think being able to kind of visually lay it out for yourself before you send it through to someone else is probably, if I've learned one thing over the years of working with designers from all different backgrounds, and Marshall could probably tell you, I still have a lot to learn on how to convey my ideas to a designer, but having like some kind of, visual board and just seeing how your ideas play together, like, look at different colors, look at things that you like, and then compare that against your avatar. I think it's a really great way to kind of go through the visual brainstorming process.
Yeah.
And it's important. It does make a really big difference, and I think you can certainly see the difference if you don't do that versus if you do. It can certainly feel not as professional and not as thought through, and then it's harder to build on that later if you've started with
Yeah.
kind of a poor foundation, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yep. And quick shameless plug, y'all. I believe I am the doc. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think I may
yes,
be the one that came up with the flow riders. Correct me if
I
I'm
think you
wrong.
I think
I,
you are actually.
I think you are. I think you are.
Oh
Super
my
funny.
goodness, the OG flow rider
Gotta
is hanging out with
add
us
that to the
today.
list.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
super funny because I remember even the week we were clowning around in our little group, and I was like, I kept calling everybody the Ecamm, right? But you went to go do a show right after, and you said, "What's up, Ecamm fam?" And of course, that's easier because I have to make things complicated because I'm a rapper, so I
Yeah.
use words that and then everybody was like, "Oh, I like this Ecamm fam," and I was like, "Freaking Marshall, you jerk!" So that's
You can't
hilarious.
fan one
Hey,
out.
one other thing that's I think is important, and I mentioned this in our how to do a podcast flow. We were going through the steps.
Mhm.
If you pick up your phone right now and look at the podcast app, I want you to pay close attention to how many of the thumbnails you can't read. And yet y'all are doing the same damn thing,
Yeah.
right? So can you talk design thought process when it comes to things like that? If you watch the
Mhm.
podcast from,
Mhm.
say, Apple or NPR or anybody that's actually making money and look at their thumbnails and then look at what you're doing. And then yeah, how do you help people think that through, Mr. Marsh?
Yeah. So it's really three main elements that go into a really cool podcast cover. And I've done my share of those. Like a lot of my clients, my design business are authors, speakers, coaches.
Mhm.
So pretty much they all have podcasts, to be honest. Some of them, one of them in particular gets 1 million downloads a month. So it's
Wow.
three main elements that go into your cover or your thumbnail. So that is the logo, it's a photo, and it's the color scheme. Okay. So logo, photo, and color scheme. Some of them don't have a
Mhm.
photo, but most of them do have a photo. And if it's a podcast that's centered around a personal brand, usually it's their photo there for credibility reasons. But if you're not that well known, then you could go either way. You don't necessarily have to have your photo on there, but you'll definitely want to have your logo down and your color scheme. And with the logo, keep it simple. Okay, keep it very simple. And usually with podcast logos, show logos, they're usually text based. It's not a lot of iconography going on or something that's super custom. Like, for example, if you look at the Flow logo right now, it's mostly text based. It is a combination logo, but with the icons, it's a square, a check, an arrow, and a circle, right? It's not like something that's custom with a T and an F and all of that. It's really simple. So when you put that on a cover
Yeah.
and you have your color scheme
Hmm.
and you can see they use that icons to create the design language. So with the background that we're on top of right now, you see a color scheme and you see the faded icons in the background. So they're using the logo to create the design language. So it's really simple. They have a color scheme and a logo, but usually if you check on your Apple Podcasts or whatever, well, we all Apple users, right? Most of us have iPhones. You check your podcast app, Spotify,
Hmm.
wherever you get your podcast, you can see a
Yeah.
common theme where it's a simple text-based logo, whether they flip it sideways or whether they have it at the bottom or the top. Usually it's a simple text-based logo. May have some type of iconography, but then it's usually a photo and then a nice color scheme that complements it. So it's real simple.
Love it.
And
I was
I
thinking of
guess my
go ahead.
my question, that's awesome. I think hugely important for us to note. But I would say the question that I have is how do you? So we've been preaching and talking endlessly about the fact that people should be both on YouTube for the video aspect of their podcast as well as going out to all the different podcast players. How do you carry some of that across for and carry it into like a YouTube thumbnail, right? Because a YouTube thumbnail has a really different vibe and kind of overall characteristics than podcast cover art.
Mhm. Yeah. So all you have to do, honestly, is remember it's YouTube. Okay. So people are going there for video first, whether it's a podcast or whatever. Just keep I would keep your thumbnails similar to your regular video thumbnails as long as it's consistent. Like one of my clients in particular, his name is Eric Thomas. He's a motivational speaker, but his thumbnails for his podcasts, they have a consistent look, but it's not just the logo, right? I don't even think he has the logo on the podcast on the podcast video thumbnails. It just says S2S episode, whatever, and then the name of the episode. But it's a consistent look. So when you go to that playlist on their channel, okay, this is the Secret to Success podcast. These are what the thumbnails look like for that. But of course, you have to use everything that they preach about on YouTube, making sure that the thumbnail is engaging. Usually it's a photo of someone, and if they have a guest, a photo of them, maybe them looking at each other with the name of the episode. So not overly complicated, but it still has, the design language that stems from the the logo. Another one of my clients, he does have his logo on his thumbnails, right? It says the Next Level Living podcast. And then, he has a similar format as I described previously. So as long as it's the thumbnails are consistent, then they're usually good to go. Of course, do your research. I know some people do A B testing, is try different types of thumbnails and things like that. But as long as it's consistent and it's you're able to easily read it and understand what's going on to get people to click, you're usually good to go.
All right, I have a super easy question because I know somebody's wanting
Awesome.
to ask this, but they don't know the difference. What's the difference between a logo and a brand? I hate myself for having to ask
So,
that.
there's so many ways to answer that, and everybody has um their own answer. But mine is your logo is just one small element of your entire brand. Like you have a brand whether you know it or not. Like you're literally a walking brand. So your brand is essentially like your vibe, how you show up, what people say about you behind your back when you're not in the room. Like, so that, all of that is, at least when it comes to personal brands and individuals, but even with companies, certain companies, they have different brands, they have different reputations, they have different vibes. What is the feeling that you give or your show gives to folks? Like that's all part of your brand. So, not just those intangibles, but also the tangible stuff like your logo, like your design language, like how you show up, how you communicate. all of that is part of your brand. So branding or visual branding is trying to capture that and display that to the world in whatever way that is, whether it's through your graphics, your website, etc., all of your touch points, how you show up visually. That's what branding or visual branding is.
There you go. Makes sense. You know, it's funny because I think what you did at the end, which helped probably a lot of people, is explaining that there's a visual branding and then there's your sort of iconography, your logos. You know, there's the going out and doing the things that will let people know who you are type of situation. And
Yep.
yeah, I
Yep.
think people confuse the two. They don't understand. You know, it's like say, well, how do you do life? Well, dude, there's so many aspects to life. Same thing with branding.
Hmm.
Technically, branding is life. How you act, how you show, how you glow up, how you present yourself to the world. That is your personal branding. You know,
Hmm.
and it's
Yeah.
funny because people went out and started telling everybody about, oh, you need to make a personal brand. You have a personal brand. You just
Yep.
don't
You
know
got
it.
it.
And Marshall has said the key element. What do people say about you behind your back?
Hmm.
Right?
And casual
And
conversation.
whatever people say about you behind your back is your personal brand, whether you know it or not. So
Hmm.
there it is. You know, there's the one person like who's the nicest person in the world, and you know, blah blah blah. And you know, she's Canadian, but you know, she's so cool and so well read. And oh, sorry, sorry.
Hey, that's not behind my back. I'm right here.
So yeah, yeah. So that was really cool. I'm glad you pointed out your visual branding is slightly different, and it can be a part of what you do, right? You know what I'm saying? So it can be a part of how you're running your show. There was these two girls before, and I always use them as an example because I think they're one of the best examples because I watched it happen. And I remember sending them to Kate's when they first started because Katie and I both love a true crime. And these girls were horrible, but they were good. They were so horrible that they were good because you could just listen to their friendship at a time where we were all at home by ourselves. So we're all at home, we're all alone, and you're just vicariously listening to their friendship happen. They just happened to be talking about true crime, and they got better and better, and they started writing books and speaking at shows, and their podcast is massive now. But I still feel that they're still them. I don't feel like they've
Yeah.
changed. And that's another part that's cool. Too many people are trying to be something that you ain't. That is not sustainable.
Yeah. Actually, though,
Yep.
that does
Absolutely.
bring up a really good question for Marshall. Is so the Morbid podcast that Doc was just talking about definitely went from being like they blew up during during the middle of the podcast. They became insanely popular. The whole true crime genre became incredibly popular, and they went from having like pretty poor audio quality and like almost no branding for the they had hobbled it together the way that many of us do when we're just starting. So how
Hmm.
do you approach like what thinking through at what point should you potentially rebrand or refresh your branding because now you have potentially a bigger audience, more budget to be able to allow something like that, or just like it's time for in your mind it's time to make it look a little bit more professional or more in line with where you are now. How do you kind of
Hmm.
lay that out and think that through without kind of losing what made it special in the first place?
Yeah, you answered it. You answered it. That's exactly when you start getting more of a budget.
Yep.
You start getting more of a budget when you feel that it's time to rebrand, and when you
Yep.
just want something new, something fresh that's more quality and more in alignment with where you're heading. It's not just about where you are. It's like where are we going, right?
Yeah.
So that's when you do it. And I talk to a lot of people about this in particular because pretty much all of my clients now, like 7, 8 figure businesses, usually centered around a personal brand, typically. And I've noticed a pattern that they got to that point without the flashy logo. They got to that point with the logo that they did on their own,
Mm.
or Homie did, or Fiverr. So at the end of the day, it's about how fire is your business or your content or whatever. Like you can't just have a dope logo and a dope podcast thumbnail and all of that and have a crappy show, right? You have to
Mm-hmm.
bring that audience in organically. You have to get it out the mud. You have to make sure that you have that steak first before you try to put some sizzle on it. So,
It's true.
I'm not
Yeah.
to, I'm not to say that you're just gonna go out here and just haphazardly create your logo. You still want to use, some logic and some guidelines when you create it initially, right? Do the best that you can, but I wouldn't spend like 5, 10, 20 grand on creating a logo for your show yet.
Yeah.
When it's kind of just starting off, but you'll know when that time comes and if that time comes. Because I used to work with clients who would spend, several a lot of money on their branding only 6 months down the road to say, you know what, my product isn't that great, or I'm not really feeling this industry like I thought I would. They wasted money, right? So it's like you want to get that market validation first before you really invest significantly into rebranding or updating. And you can always do that. Just say, look, I need something that's gonna hold me over for now. Of course, make it as good as you can make it. But then at some point when we get more revenue, then we'll rebrand, or update or refresh or what have you.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I totally like to look at the brands that are super, super big now and sort of famous, and they're still using the type logo that they
Mm.
made probably in word art way back in the day, right? Like, okay, a large portion of the people are sitting here looking at a Shure logo. That logo
Yeah.
is from 1928. Ain't nobody
Mhm,
touched it since 1928. You know what they did to it? Last year they made it green. Step up. You look at Road. They didn't spend a lot of money on it. They just put the last name and called it a day. It's just there. It's
mhm,
Road. Gangster. Like people are overthinking it. Like, you're right. Do something simple, typography, and let it ride until you got
mhm,
your fruit in the game. And to this day, people go out and shop for the giant Nike logo, not the swoosh. That one was different, but the
mhm,
words written
mhm,
in simple font, straight across. Ain't nobody know. Supreme should have told people that you can do dope stuff with a simple logo with very little
mhm,
adjustments to it. Like,
mhm,
so don't get. Here's the thing: if your stuff is good, the logo's dope. That's what it is.
mhm.
If your stuff
That's
is
yeah.
good, the logo is absolutely dope. Nobody's caring. What
Mhm,
a lot of people are using, and this is we've all done it. I may have done it. I'm not even going may. I know I've done it. We've all done it. We wanted this logo to hide the fact that we were going to be smaller than our competition. We were hoping that having the doper logo of all the people in the competition was going to somehow give us provenance, but that's not where provenance comes from. Provenance comes from you doing the work and you showing up and you being what your customers are looking for when they're looking for it. So
yeah,
yeah, just cruise the store one day and look at the logos that somebody's nephew made, but they still kicking it to this day.
yeah. And a big part of that is the fact that that proves your point that branding is more than a logo. So when people
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
buy into the brand, the logo isn't that even it's not even that big of a deal. Think about Supreme. Like when you think about Supreme, whatever thoughts come to your mind, that's their brand. Whether it's skaters, whether it's LA, whether it's, premium but simple, minimal, what have you, that's their brand, right? So all of those intangibles, like that feeling that you get when you think about something like Supreme or even Sure, it's premium, it's the best in the business, and you try to get guess a bit more accessible and to either younger podcasters or people that aren't as techy with the MB7 and now the new SM7BD or whatever it's called,
Yeah.
DB. um
DB.
you
Yeah.
have a feeling when you think of Shure, right? And that logo is just this one small part of it.
Yeah. It makes me think a little bit about like brand recognition and everything you just said there. It's I guess I think a little bit about like how careful you probably need to be, and hopefully we all get to this point. I think many of us are not quite there yet, but if you've been working and building up a podcast for some length of time and you have a pretty like solid following, whatever that number is, and then you decide that you want to do some kind of brand refresh or update, yeah, I guess how cautious or careful do you need to be to not make it so drastic of a change that you're like shocking or upsetting your constant following? Like again, I think about Morbid, and they've
Mhm,
recently changed their theme song, and like I'm sure their
mhm.
initial theme song was probably something that was like found quickly and easily, like even the Flows theme song that we're now used to and hearing often. It's like changes like that, like I noticed that and I was like, oh, I don't like this. Like this doesn't feel like my
Right.
show. And so yeah, I wonder like obviously that's an important aspect as you're thinking through your initial branding, and also at that point where you feel like, oh, I'm ready to do something different. I guess what are the things you have to consider? How careful should you be at that point that you're not totally throwing everything away or finding what you need to hold on
Super
to?
careful. Super you
Yeah.
wanna be super careful. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Especially when it comes to the logo, I would make slight refreshes. Even if you, like, Google, brand refreshes, look at
Yeah.
Pepsi,
Mhm.
Tropicana over the years, you'll see it's, like, iterations. So they
Yeah.
Dude,
still
Burger King,
retain.
I swear they change it every 3 or 4 years. Burger King be switching
Right.
that logo. But if you've been to
Yeah.
Burger
And
King
now they
Amesbury,
it's
you
like they went
understand
back
why.
to the beginning. Exactly.
Yes.
Right? But
Yeah,
look,
yes,
part of their
they go
brand,
back.
Doc, I'm glad you mentioned that, is
Yeah,
look, you can have the colors, the green, the red, the brown, and that's Burger King, right?
Yeah.
So the logo is
yeah,
one small part of it, but they have that signature
Mm.
color scheme of the Whopper. That's part of their brand. And you look at the bags, it's like four stripes, and that's a Whopper. So
yeah,
that's that's that feeling. You can almost smell it looking at those colors. And I know I
yeah,
can. You know what I'm saying? So that's a really good point. But to answer your question, Katie, keep the changes simple, and especially those staples like the theme song. That's huge. My wife and I
Mhm.
recently picked back up watching The Walking Dead, and the new
Mm.
intro. We're on season 8. I was like, "Oh, this is dope," but they kept the music, and we both said to
Yeah.
each other, "I'm glad they kept the music because you can just hear that music coming on. You don't even have to be looking at the TV. You can be cleaning up the kitchen, you hear that music, and it's time for The
Mhm.
Walking Dead." Had they changed that music, that would have annoyed us. You know what I'm saying? Like you could change even
facts.
the Game of Thrones every season. They would make change the little animation, but it's the same whatever it is, violin or whatever that they play and the drums. That's Game of Thrones coming on. And I would
True.
also bring your audience into that process should you decide to rebrand or refresh. Say, hey guys, this is
Mm.
what we're thinking. We maybe want to bring you into the process. Make it fun, make it collaborative, and then they will feel like they had more stake in the game, and make it fun, and that way you're creating something that your audience won't hate as well.
Dude, you know
Yeah.
what's super funny is Game of Thrones, and I'm glad you mentioned it because that's my steez. You can go into the grocery store and really loudly go and stop. Somebody would go somebody
Yeah.
somebody will like add it
Yep.
in. That's one of those
It doesn't
ones
get
that
old.
you could trigger a symphony, like the old joint where we said would be funny, walk around the store and just walk into the aisle and pop in real quick and be like, "Manam," and then wait for somebody in the aisle to go, and it's inevitable. Somebody does it, right?
Yeah.
It's just one of those things that happens. So very cool. Here's something, Katie, to your point, and I thought it was a good option. you know, a lot of it is what your audience is used to. And I guess if you're at the level where your audience is big enough, why not invite them to
Yeah.
work on branding and be like, guys, we got this new thing coming up, and
Mhm.
we're at
Mhm.
a level that we want to do some rebranding to help more people find the show. And you guys, I mean, I kind of owe it to you. Here, let's work on this. What can we do? And people will be excited, and you don't have to listen to them, but just invite them in, and then
Mhm.
you have, so there it is. Now,
Mhm.
I this is a super good question, and it goes on to what I was saying, and so it's kind of funny that we think the same. Because yeah, I hate to admit that I think like this guy, but Jeff even asked the point: How soon should
Yeah.
you start educating your audience that the brand is going to go through a refresh? Should it be a month? Should it be 3 months? Now that
Mhm.
that's a fantastic question because that goes on to what I was saying.
Yeah, so it all depends on when you decide to do that. But most of the viewers of this, unless you're gonna just redo your logo now, because a lot of us, if you're just starting out, we're still at a point where we could update it. Unless you're starting to get traction. If you're starting to get traction, I would hold off. You don't want to undo anything that's working for you right now.
Mhm.
But let's say it's a year down the line. and you say, okay, I think I want to go ahead and refresh. Then just let them know whenever you think the time is right. And I would do the bulk of it or use your own research to kind of initiate and get the process going, and then have them involved, just like Doc said, if you want to invite them in. Um, but as far as the decision making, you don't want to have too many birds chirping. Like, you don't want to have too much input. So I would maybe do like some type of polls. Maybe once you narrow down the 3 logos you like the best or something like that, say, hey, which one of these, do a poll or something. Hey, which one of these are you feeling the
Yeah,
most? Things like that.
yeah.
Um, you could do something as simple as put it up in your Instagram stories, or things like that. I've seen some of my clients do things like that. I'll send over some designs, couple concepts, and next thing you know, it'll be in their Instagram stories and people are voting on them. I'm like, wow, I didn't know you were doing that, but it's very effective, right? And then they'll send me a decision shortly
Yeah.
after that.
Yeah, that's
So I mean,
super
that's something
funny.
that you could do as well.
Hey, all
I
right. So
love
I got a question for you real quick too, right? This is one of these weird doc questions. You probably listen to a lot of, say, people coming on and talking about branding, right? You know, quote unquote branding experts or logo experts or whatever. What is the one question that you hear people ask them all the time that people should be asking, but they're not asking? What's the question people about? Let me fix this. About branding, when it comes to branding, what is the question should be asking, but people are not asking?
The number one thing I would say, would just going back to the beginning of the conversation, is about the audience. I feel like a lot of people try to approach the branding process not even considering the audience. They make it all about themselves. Like, this is what I want. I need this in the logo. I need a pin that represents my mother because she used to sew, and I need a hat because my dad used to wear a particular type of hat, and it has all this meaning to me. But what does that have to do with your audience? What does that have to do with your
Mhm.
actual logo or your business or your podcast or whatever? It may not have anything to do with it. It may completely fly over your audience's head. So when you enter that territory, you'll find yourself having to explain what this means, what that means in the logo. You're not always going to be able to do that. And you want the logo and the branding to draw people in, without you having to do that yourself. So what's going to make them want to click on it and view your show or your podcast, or click on it and listen to your podcast, without you having to explain, okay, this is why I have this in the logo. This is why I have that in the logo. And you can eradicate all that if you start with what your audience would like, what would appeal to them first and foremost. That's the most important thing out of what I do, honestly, is identifying and prioritizing my clients' target audiences. That's huge, because that's what it's about at the end of the day. Like, you're not just putting out content just because you feel like it. You're doing it to add value to somebody, right? So that's it's
Yeah.
huge.
It's been such it's like super important for all for all those in the back. This has been like a very
Hmm.
common theme that has gone through almost every single episode of this show, no matter what topic we're discussing, has been this like what is your passion for what you're trying to create? It should be helping other people, and who are those people? Like, you're not going to be able to brainstorm what your show is about, come up with topic ideas, know what kind of guests to
Hmm.
bring on, know how, like, all of the steps and
Yeah.
process of a podcast or any kind of show, or I mean, or business, I guess, in general, is
Hmm.
really thinking that through. Like, what is your why, and who are the people
Hmm.
that you are
Right.
doing it for? So that's huge. I think and it is weirdly enough easy to forget. It shouldn't be, but it is one of those things
Right.
where, because like especially with branding, because the branding is so visual and such a like fun part of the process. Like, how does the show
Right.
look? Like, what are the cool like frames you have around it? I think it can be really easily forgotten, especially if you are starting off by doing it yourself. Like, it's really easy for us to
Hmm.
jump into like a Canva or an Adobe Express and be like, yeah, I like purple in the background. I like
Right.
circles. I want to put, it's like it is easy to kind of get distracted by how easy some of these tools are, and and lose kind of what the purpose is behind it. So I think it's an important reminder.
Yep. Yep.
So here's another one for everybody. This is for Marshall, Katie, folks in the live studio audience, and folks listening at home. You could actually write in and answer this question. I would like you to think back and yes or no, or some sort of positive or negative affirmation. Have you like literally gone into your podcast app your aggregator, and then you're scrolling through looking for a podcast and stop on one because the logo caught your eye, or
Oh,
because you know what I'm saying? I don't think I've ever picked a show because of the logo. That's just me, but I'm curious. Has anybody ever
I do.
got you?
Oh, I
I'm
absolutely
equally
do.
bad for that with
So,
shows
so
and
what
with
show
bottles
is
of
it?
wine.
What show is it? Well, bottles of wine. Okay, so the reason why I asked about the show because I say logo, and you might be talking about label. Label and logo ain't the same thing,
That's true.
right?
That's a good.
Thumbnail, and logo are not the same thing.
Yeah.
NPR podcasts, their logo is really, really tiny in the top. It just says NPR in blue and
Yeah.
red and whatever. You don't even pay attention to it. You're looking at the actual cover art. So I said logo, and because we were talking about logos.
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't think I've picked by the logo. I've definitely though gone through like Apple Podcasts, for example, and been like, oh, I want to find a new, like cooking podcast or true crime podcast or what have you, and then scrolled through and made decisions to read more or learn more or listen to that show based on what their cover art is.
Yes. So, and that was my point. Like, cover art is important. I think a lot of people stress out over their logo, and you're not even going to see it. Like most people don't think. The iHeart podcast, the iHeart logo is really tiny. It's not very big. In Wandery, the Wandery podcast, the Wandery logo is normally either black or white, and it's just the word Wandery written in Nutra display. This weird typeface you wouldn't know about, but it's again, you're not looking at it. You don't even know it's there. Like most people have listened to Wandery shows and don't even know they're Wandery shows other than the advertisements, right?
Mhm.
When you listen to a podcast on Twit, the Twit logo is really tiny. This, week in photo, this week in tech is big. Mac Break Weekly is big. iOS Today is big, but the Twit logo is small. So again, don't freak out on the logo. Let's worry about getting your I just said it. Cover art.
Cover art.
Let's worry about getting your cover art squared away. And that should be primarily letters and pictures. I think that, like, even for us, we probably need to redo ours because we put the title on there, but sometimes the title gets psycho and you can't read it. So, like, we should just have it more about, something that's going to drag your eye in. And I think if you look at the current offerings and you realize the changes that have been made in the podcast app, they were made in order to make it discovery better. Apple gave us a heads up. They told us what to do, and still people haven't changed it. And so when you look at it in a list format, some of these, I'm looking at big time shows. I'm like, bruh, you're only living off of popularity right now, but there's going to be zero discovery with this look and feel. Looking at you, Sarah Silverman.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
I mean, even
There's
ours is. Sorry, go ahead, Marshall.
I was gonna say there's such an influx of new podcasts that just like the internet, like so many websites out here. Some of them are junk, some of them are good, but having the right information could help set you apart. Just like Doc saying, so Sarah Silverman, I haven't seen it, but just because somebody has a big platform doesn't mean that their stuff is good. Just like that's my whole business is based on that. More established businesses, personal brands, but that doesn't mean that their stuff is fire, right? So you can kind of set yourself apart by just being a little more intentional about setting your cover art, your logo, and your branding up the best you can right now, rather than just not paying attention to it at all.
Yeah. This is a great question. I think I know the answer to it, but I'm excited to ask it anyway. What about taglines? How do you approach? So you have your name of your show itself, but if you have a tagline, how do you incorporate that into any of your podcast artwork, or should that just be left off because we're trying to be more minimal?
Yeah, I would leave it off. Maybe put it in your in your description, your podcast description. It's good to have one in mind. You said don't put it in the description.
What? I don't know
Well,
your tagline. Okay, straight up, dude. You're one of my best friends in the planet. I don't even know your freaking tagline. So how am I going to Google your tagline so the description helps me find your podcast? I am Steve off the street. I don't know you. What about your tagline am I Googling?
yeah, you're right. You're not going to Google it, but
So
in
so
my
therefore it's
opinion,
useless.
yeah, you could take that approach, but in my opinion, at least
Uh,
it could kind of serve as your North Star, or like almost like an elevator pitch. Somebody
yeah,
asks you like, "Oh,
yeah,
what
that's
do you
right.
have?" "Oh, I had the High Value Designer podcast. It's, business tips, tools for graphic designers." Something simple that tells. It's almost like an impact statement. It may
Yeah.
not be a catchy tagline, but as long as it's something that you could tell somebody in one sentence what it's about, that's kind of what I'm
Okay,
talking about.
so
And
that
at least
goes in
having
your
that.
podcast summary. That's not in the description. See, and again, this is where people are missing of the mechanics, right? In your MP3, you have a podcast summary, and then you have a description of your show, right? In a way, you would put that the summary is going to come before the description. So, in other words, I've been said it backwards. You can put that in the description, but not in the summary. The summary is what is the little 3 or 4 lines that pops up. That's only like 180-ish characters that let somebody know what that particular episode's about, right? But
Oh,
in your
okay, gotcha.
description,
Yeah,
yes, we definitely have that stuff in our descriptions. Those
yeah.
are still
Yeah.
Googleable, but I have a whole chart on how Apple Podcast, still the one that matters, on how they scan your podcast for the words when people search, right?
Mhm.
And I got this from, I don't know, one of the main people at Libsyn who host the majority of the podcasts out there for as long as they have. And they have all the information. So Rob Walsh has a whole masterclass on what people should and shouldn't be putting in their stuff and where and how Apple searches for it. And once I read that, I'm like, yo, 99% of the podcasts out there doing it wrong and wondering why they're not discoverable
Mhm.
because we're
Yeah.
trying to make discovery based off of humans, but you got to remember the human is reading what the robot read,
Mhm.
right? So wanting to put that love in there because that's you and that's what people are going to catch, you're assuming people read that. No, a
Mhm.
robot reads it. The person
Mhm.
reads what the robot feeds. The robot feeds
Mhm.
what they read. So if they skipped over your line, the human's never going to see it. The reason why they know it is because they did actually come for whatever other reason. And now it's ingrained in their head because they hear you say it enough. That's branding.
Mhm.
But if
Mhm.
you want
Yeah.
discovery based off of your branding, you do not waste that real estate with what you think is cute because you feel good. Feelings ain't facts, folks.
Yeah. Yeah. And y'all know, look, y'all, I'm a man of the people. So description, summary, tomato. I think the people know what I meant when I said just have it in mind. When you
No,
out here. Well,
100%.
maybe we can
People
have another
understand that.
episode on discovery, but this one's
Yeah.
about,
Yeah. No,
branding. But
people
yeah, we can
people
get into the weeds
100%
of that stuff
understand that.
another time.
You do have to know that. I want everybody to remember that. The people 100% understand that. But unless you brought them there, the robot is searching it first. This is where people, in your
Steak.
SEO, this is where
Eat that
people
steak.
always mess up. Yeah, you got it. Exactly. So just know it's cool that you do it, but make sure you put it in a place where it's going to help the more people find it because I'm sure your obvious goal is to help as many people as possible. Or actually take that
Yeah,
back.
for sure.
Yeah. It might not be as many people. It's the right people. I think that's a better
The right
approach.
people, yeah.
The
Yeah.
right people.
As many of the
Many,
right people.
many, the many people is how we get in trouble because we be trying to please everybody and then you can't really
Right.
find your audience that way. So that's important as well.
All right, last
Yeah.
question. So we're sensitive to Marshall's time and everyone's schedule. Is there a way to test if your logo or brand will be effective? Granted, one that followed all the checklist guidelines in creating and during pre-launch. Can you test it?
Well, I would ask your audience, put it up, ask them what they think about it. That's an easy way, but I have a criteria that I like to use. It's pretty much a bulletproof formula. It's making sure that your logo is simple. We talked about that today. Not a lot going on, not too much going on with it. Make sure it's 2 to 3 colors max. A simple icon, if you use some type of icon, make sure that it's memorable. Make sure that it's timeless, like the examples Doc shared earlier, your Shure logo. I forget what the other one is that wasn't changed since like Nike, whatever. Those
Mhm.
logos haven't been changed, 50 plus years because they're timeless. Is it versatile? So when you scale it down at the corner of your show, like the flows up that you're looking at right there, scale it down, put it at the corner of a video, put it at the top of your website, on your cover art, which is on people's phones, which is small. When people first see it, can they read it? Is it legible? Do they know what it is? Or do you have to pull out a magnifying glass or zoom in to see what's going on in your logo? They shouldn't have to do that. Is it appropriate to your audience? And is it unique? Simple, memorable, timeless, versatile, appropriate, and unique. Unique is like a bonus because that goes without saying, but that's the bulletproof logo criteria that I would use when creating your logos. Does that answer your question, Katie? Am I missing
Oh
anything?
my gosh, no, that's perfect, I think. And write that down, everyone. We'll have to follow up and add that
Yes,
into the
simple,
description.
memorable, timeless, versatile, appropriate, and unique.
And unique. Yeah, no, I think that's huge. Well, Marshall, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And for anyone that is listening later or missed the beginning of this episode, Marshall is live on the Ecamm channel every single Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern, often including like 2 days from now. So October 26th, he does these like
Yep.
live sessions where he literally is creating podcast branding and podcast logos on the go. So if you're like, wow, I would really like to be able to like walk through that process, that's a really great opportunity. I think it's a really special what you're doing there, and people love it. So it's a lot of fun to just see kind of how your mind works as you're thinking through some of these things.
Yeah, yeah, y'all definitely tune in because it's a lot of fun, and usually it may be 2 or 3 people that volunteer, out of the viewers, so you
Yeah.
have a good chance of getting selected. Almost like, the claw on Toy Story. Uh,
We have
so,
been
it's
chosen.
yeah, it's fun. It's a lot of fun, and it just goes without just like it nails the I don't want to say put the nail in the coffin, but it drives the point home that if you keep it real simple, it doesn't have to take you that long, right?
Yeah.
So I usually can knock a logo out in about an hour for the podcast. It's a bit different than the personal branding, the
Yeah.
corporate branding that I do, but you can see how simple it is, and I usually get some type of inspiration from somewhere else. So I don't have to do the thinking part, and I may select something and build off of it. So it's a lot of fun, man. Shout out to those. I think Obs is in the
Yeah.
audience today. We did her
Yeah.
logo. Saw Mommy Lala. Of course, we created the logos at Creator Camp. So
Yeah.
yeah, definitely tune in, y'all. Thursdays at 2 p.m. Eastern.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you so much. Luis, roll our credits.
Boom.
Thank you.
Boom. Take it away, Doc.
Okay, so I was typing you you could find the flow at flow.ecamm.com, and this is where you can drop in all of your questions. We have the ability for you to send us an email. You can send us to flow at flow@ecamm.com, or you can reach us any of the socials and say, hey, I was listening to Flow and I have a question. And so there, you can do that there. And now also we want to remind you that we absolutely love Captivate. We use Captivate to host our show. And part of the reason why we picked Captivate is they have a wonderful growth platform that helps you grow your podcast. This is where you're going to find out all of the cool information that you're looking for, like how does Apple search actually works, the title, the author, and then it's sorted by the number of subscribers. So knowing that makes it easier for you to do things like take the word the out of the main portion of your title. Turns out the is really bad for your title, as we listen to the flow. So also next we like to give some shout outs to the script. The script is what we use, and it's funny, I've been watching people in the community talk a lot about the script recently, because people are like, oh, should I really do the script? Like everyone keeps talking about it. Should I use? Yeah, absolutely. The answer is yes. Just use it. It does make your job easier, especially people who love to say, oh, I like recording this, but I don't know how to edit. Guess what the script does? It makes editing really, really simple, because if you can use Word, you can use the script, and therefore you would edit your podcast. So we'd like to say one more time, thank you to all of the Flow Riders. Big ups to Mr. Marshall Fawkes for coming through and kicking it with us today. And I've been outfoxed. Marshall Fawkes and Katie Fox, you get it?
I
Flow
love it.
Riders out.